Hi, I'm Mary. I'm 25 years old and I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when I was 23. But my symptoms actually started when I was 13, but it took 10 years to get diagnosed because I kept being dismissed by my doctors. When I first went, obviously I was a minor, so my parents accompanied me, and despite them telling my doctor that I could barely move, and at the time I was really sporty, I was doing sports competitions and things like that, he just told me it was growing pains. My parents insisted, so we did go and do some x-rays and some MRIs, but they all came back completely clear. And at the time, the pain would last 2 to 3 weeks, and then I'd go back to completely normal. So my doctor just said, see, it is growing pains. But obviously, eventually the pain would come back a couple of years later, and again, the doctor would send me for x-rays, MRIs, but they'd still come back completely clear. So again, he was just like, there's nothing I can do, and just dismissed it again. So eventually I sort of stopped going to the doctors when my knees started hurting, because I just thought, what's the point? And I just sort of put it off and put it off. In 2021 and 2022, the pain started getting bad again, and I just dismissed it. But I was forced to take things seriously and go to the doctors in February 2023, when essentially my life changed. I was on my way to work. It was colder than I thought it would, and I hadn't put enough layers on. I got off the train and I could not move. Essentially, I had to force myself to walk to work and spend the day at work, but I was in agonizing pain. It was so hard to concentrate, and I just had to bear the brunt of it. It wasn't the same doctors when I was a child, but I was still apprehensive about going. And when I went, I took my folder with all my x-rays and my scans from the previous years, saying I've had knee pain since I was 13. The first thing I was asked was, had I gained weight? That was frustrating because I was like, I've been having issues since I was 13. Weight has nothing to do with this. So she just sent me for a full blood test and that was it. Between that appointment and my next appointment with her, my knees had swollen, so I took a photo just in case the swelling would disappear by the time I went to see her. And I also asked my dad to come with me, just even if he didn't say anything, just to sit in the doctor's office with me, because again, I was worried about being dismissed. When she saw it swollen, she sent me for an x-ray and an MRI, and something did come up in those ones. But by then I'd already booked an appointment with a rheumatologist. At the beginning with my rheumatologist, I did feel heard. He did get me diagnosed, but then he quickly sort of lost interest. Every time I'd go back to him on my new medication, I'd be like, hey, I'm still in a lot of pain. I still can barely move. I don't think the medicine's working. And every time he'd be like, oh, we'll see next time, we'll see next time. And then by then, 2 years had gone by. I was reluctant to change specialist because I was worried about being dismissed again, potentially having to go through a whole diagnosis process again. But with a lot of encouragement from my partner, I bit the bullet and finally changed. I finally feel heard and listened to by my new specialist, and it's refreshing and it's reassuring that I know I finally have someone that is paying attention to my pain. Living life with a chronic illness isn't quite what you expect it to be. It's endless doctor's appointments, but also the daily life aspect has changed so much to what I used to do 3 years ago. Now I always need to wear knee supports when I go out. I always have a portable walking stick with me just in case. I opted for a foldable walking stick because it's just so much more convenient. When I'm done using it, I just throw an elastic around it. It snaps up quick. I can throw it in my handbag and off I go. But it also means if I've not started the day with it, it's always in my handbag. I just take the elastic off, it snaps automatically into place, and I'm good to go. When it comes to just cooking, it's really hard. I tire so much more easily now, to the point that I actually have a stool for when I'm cooking for myself, just to make things easier. Coming to terms with needing mobility aids was a long battle. I kept thinking, I'm not disabled enough to need a walking stick, I'm not disabled enough to need a shower stool. And it took a lot of encouragement from my partner actually to finally accept that these things will make my life easier. Also, when I'm using my walking stick out in public, I do get some funny looks. In fact, once I was actually shouted at by an old lady on the bus because I was sitting in one of the priority seats. Somebody ended up giving up their seat, but she sort of continued to yell at me, and it was quite a scary experience. I also get funny looks when I park in disabled bays because I do have a blue badge, but obviously people see a young person walking out, and if I'm wearing long trousers, people don't see that I've got knee supports, and obviously I don't always use my walking stick if I'm on a good day, so I've had quite a few funny looks as well from people when I get out of my car.
We shouldn't need to advocate for ourselves to be listened to and heard by our doctors.